Could we have a little shush, please, for the questioners?
Have I? My question is one for Louis. Louis, if I understood it, in DIT they actually run a facility management course, do they not?
Yeah,
for people who are going to ultimately engage in that particular discipline long term.
Yeah, hold on. This working? Can you hear me?
Can you make that loud?
I think we're having a private conversation.
I think we might be, yeah. Okay. Yes, DIT is constantly expanding the number of courses that it's running, and one of them that it's expanding into is facilities management.
And are they not driving a vision of where ultimately the campus where people are going to be trained in this discipline should be? Surely they would have a say in what you ultimately have as the tools you manage the facility with.
Well, the planning for the course is still in the very early stages. So it will be the people who will be actually working with that they're concentrating first of all on getting the course up and running.
Okay, so they're not really in sync with your
Sorry for
development.
cutting across here. Could I ask for a bit of silence, please? A bit of manners for the people who are asking questions and answering them. If people want to talk, they can go outside. Any other questions? Yeah. Well, it's often the case. I mean, one question that comes to me about the Grange Gorman project, for instance, and people talking about leadership. Brian Hayes is my minister, but as I said, politics works on a very short timeline, and working at things beyond 2 years is a very different situation. From the American experience, because since we have two very good people from the States, what would be the view there?
With the timeline?
Timeline and the adoption by the state organs and government federal organs.
First?
The Australian context, so I'll leave that to you.
If I understand the question correctly, is what happens in the American context when you're doing a large project that's over a very long period of time, and I think different names for agencies, different players, but I think the exact same problems occur in the United States. An owner, whether you say it's the funding agency or whoever is really the owner, finding ways to manage the complexity of all the relationships and over time with the funding sources especially is very difficult. And but I think it's the same problem that every university faces. One of the reasons that one of the clients that I kind of truncated my presentation. One of the clients I was going to show was the Coast Guard Academy in Connecticut. And they're an established school, but they're always building and renovating and doing things. And what they came to was they're using these technologies to create a living master plan. So instead of every 5 years doing a master plan, they do a living master plan that by connecting sensors and the models in a way that they're accessible all the time. Instead of going back and looking at things after they occur, they look at the things, their master plan actually adapts as they do things on campus. And I think the clients that I see that are doing things like that, they're creating a system that grows, that takes that concept that everybody kind of talks about with BIM, that it builds up over time, but they basically create a framework that really does build up over time is the way they manage these things. And I think that's what I've seen at least.
Yeah.
Thank you, Thank you, Kieran. Malachi Matthews, DIT. I have to say I'm incredibly disappointed in terms of the attitude towards building information modelling and the project in Grange Gorman. This should be the leader project for building information modelling in the country. This should be the project that pushes through and pushes BIM up to the top of the hill so we can actually coast down. This should be the leader. And I believe there's an enormous opportunity being lost here. And I understand the complexities of procurement, excuse me, and the difficulties. But we spoke over the last couple of days here in terms of BIM being a social thing, but the human element of it, and the human element driving BIM. And I think that's what's missing here. And if there isn't somebody from the government, if there isn't somebody on the team who is banging the table saying, the evidence is there, if this is a project over the next 10, 20, 30 years, the man in the middle here is the can-do man. He's done it. He has proved that it can be done. But this project is slipping away from us in terms of what can be done with it. And I think that's a shame, and that's a pity, and that's a reflection on our government's attitude towards this new process and these new technologies. It's too slow. Maybe it happened a year or two too quickly, and that's the only excuse I'll give. But if we don't grasp this now, at this point, and as being the lead project, well then it will slip away, and that will be an awful shame.
I noticed the enthusiasm of the clap. However, is there a question rather than a statement?
I don't despair as much. I mean, the one thing that is certain is every bit of design up in Grangegorman is going to be done in digital format. It will be available, and if the degree of advantage from having models for FM become apparent, it won't be an impossible task to retrospectively create that model. It's just really down to a question of when it's actually going to be put together for use during FM. It doesn't necessarily have to be an outcome of the initial construction. I have no doubt that the people doing the PPP will create one anyway for their own financial reasons, and there's no great reason why it couldn't be done for the rest of the campus retrospectively.
Okay, can I just mention on that BIM will be included in the PPPs. BIM is part of the PPP, but it's the overall BIM strategy for the site that's for the overall project. Yes, there's. Sorry.
Sorry, Paul Lennon, Cody Partnership Architects. We're involved in one of the consortiums bidding for the research building, and I think it's supposed to be very disappointed that when the information came out last week that it was all just PDFs and no model.
Okay, well, I'm not directly involved in that project, so I don't really know the details of it, but you know, as I was saying with the PPP, there is a requirement of the PPP bidders to address the whole issue of BIM. But it goes back to what I was saying, is that what exactly is BIM and what exactly are we looking for is the thing for the whole site. And if we could just mention in relation to the time frame as well, you know, I know governments come and go, and I know that you know, ministers who are ministers now may not be the ministers in those places in the next government, but there is a move across all of Irish society now to try and drive down prices in what we do to deliver public services, and to try and drive up efficiencies and to drive up the quality of the service in doing so. And if BIM can deliver 20% savings, this is a no-brainer. You know, regardless of how long
it just
time
has to have the metrics to prove that, and rather than the theory of it. Ralph?
Yeah, I think we had 3 incredibly inspiring talks this morning, and I suppose my question is going to be for Laura, but I'm going to start with Louis' comment. I think Louis made the best comment, is we have to make this easy. It has to be for the stupid guy, like to be easy to use. And I mean, you could take the spreadsheets of the Grangegorman development and what Finnis was saying, in half an hour, the whole campus could be in BIM, you know, if you just made that decision, you know, to a level. And we could make this, you could pick up your smartphone and look at a map go to a dot, pick on the building, and get information about that building. And BIM could just start in half an hour's time if just two of you talk together. But my question's for Laura as an educator. We really do need to educate this industry, and I know your background is in education, in educating new students. But what advice would you give an industry to sort of educate themselves? The people who've gone through school and are working at the moment and have to deal with this big issue, which is an enormous mind block. Would you have any advice for this industry? How do we just get off our chairs and just do this?
It's an excellent question, and I had a conversation yesterday with someone from the Architects Institute, and acknowledged that we've reached in the industry such a level of complexity that we can no longer be, let's say, masters of knowledge for every aspect of the industry. So even within, we'll say, the profession or the construction industry, we have to start working in very complementary ways. So obviously we have graduates that come out who are really proficient in the digital world. But then you have senior practitioners who have wisdom from experience that just can't be underestimated. And it's probably not the best use of their time to go back and learn how to be really savvy with those digital models. But what we try to do is set up environments where they're really learning from each other. And so that experience and wisdom, which can't be underestimated, and the savvy of the young professional who's technologically proficient, how do you create an environment where there's mutual learning? And then eventually that's a cycle when the young practitioner, but there needs to be mutual respect, there needs to be trust, there needs to be value. There can't be an attitude, particularly in the architecture profession, where they have to suffer like I did. And that's a real problem at the moment, which is why much of the work I'm doing is focused on that gap in between. How do you connect and harness what is really good in the academy, particularly, and that's why we're shifting the research into practice and creating research environments in practice where it's really needed as just-in-time knowledge. So it's all about the integration of things. The more we fragment and separate, the more we're going to suffer. And I just wanted to make one comment on the Grange Gorman project and, the observation. Of course, as you were presenting, my natural reaction was, well, this is a prime demonstration project. You know that, we all know that, there was the observation. But having worked intensively to advise government, they need evidence to take the leap that demonstration is really worth it. And even though you have an expert here, he's working with different procurement models. He's working with a different government, with a different industry, with complete, and there can be some level of translation, but you've got to work on small demonstrations that give the evidence that these long-term decisions, the cycle for a politician is going to be 3 or 4 years, yet they're making decisions that will affect us for a century. So how do you, yes, it should be a demonstration, but it's our responsibility to put real evidence in front that is worth the risk, so that we're shifting to a reward model, and particularly for architects, that we resume responsibility that we gave up, that is going to not diminish our profession, but in fact enhance it. So agreed, but there's some responsibility on our side also to get it to the demonstration point.
Could I add to that? I think the idea that there probably either are going to be models done or there should be models done on Grange Gorman, I think both of those positions are correct. The one thing that I would urge everyone to do, because I suspect the BIM choir is here, okay, that the people who don't have a clue about BIM are not in this room for the most part, and in order for this to go, what we've seen, in order for this to move forward and being able to build models today that at some future point we can use, and they don't become that data rotted, they don't become that piece of paper in the file cabinet in the basement. There has to be, you have to plan for the ultimate outcome of your models. Okay, so I would urge you, you may not do anything else. The political realities often on these large projects are very difficult to overcome. You know, it would be great to make it a demonstration project, all the things, but at the minimum, any little BIM project, you know, it's just my thing, so I have to, let me keep pushing the point. These projects that are basically silos of BIM, the only connections are really within the team. The major issue is do what I believe Laura Handler was talking about yesterday. Others have probably talked about, you have to have a plan for where your model's ultimate outcome is going to be. If you don't have that, and if you don't build your models to where if the goal is to make them usable within a ecosystem later, if the goal is to make the models usable for facility management, you know, maybe in a shorter later, they have to be planned and developed for that framework. And that, I would tell you right now, it's actually a very, very small increment, and it's very, very easy to do, but most people do not do it. So if you can't at least do that, you might as well go back to drafting on Mylar with ink. So, because it's going to be, because the data, digital data will be exactly the same value after it's finished. So. Yeah.
Okay, I'm conscious of time, but I would say to the people who would be saying why, for instance, I've been asked by the Government Contracts Committee and the Minister to look at introducing a BIM. That decision will be made before the end of next year, but we're not going to be pushed into it by people who are selling a product or whatever, and it'll have to be the best for the industry and all the professions related to it. So, and there is not just one way, and so I'm talking to the different groupings, and a decision will be made by the end of next year. We will be moving towards the system, but the question is which system or how and what expense it puts the industry to, it has to be teased out as well. With that, I'd like to just thank our three speakers for very interesting, and I'm going to be following up discussions with them based on the information I need to gather in the next year. So I'd like if everyone could show their appreciation to the speakers.